Let's talk about My Hero Academia chapter 341. And well, I don't know how to feel about My Hero Academia chapter 341. It seems like Horikoshi is setting up the final stages of My Hero Academia by giving us a hint at the mindset of the villains, but doing it in such a way that we have to have a high level of sympathy for the villains, which is really bad because we're supposed to be praising the heroes. We want the heroes to win. But Horikoshi doesn't want us to win, and he wants himself to win by making us feel sad about what is going on to the villains while they're planning to destroy the heroes. This is masterful work, and even though this chapter may not have been a banger in the sense of so much excitement, to me, I truly enjoyed this chapter because I'm able to sit back and really gather my thoughts on characters and get a better understanding as to why they're doing what they're doing. Hey, I'm Wise, and that is a painting of Shoto that I painted in 2016. And if you looked really close to right where I'm pointing, his ear is missing. So don't judge me, because if you judge me, you'll be just as bad as the people who judge Toga in My Hero Academia chapter 341. That was a great segue. Now, the beginning of the chapter focuses on Toga and her reminiscing over her past experiences by her going to her previous home and seeing how everything has changed since she ran away. And I think the most interesting thing about Toga going back to her home is the graffiti that's written on the walls all around her house. Each of the markings were describing how Toga was viewed by the civilians, and more likely than not, even her parents and siblings. And this brings a very strong perspective about why Toga left, being that she was often told that she was a demon child, a burden, a vampire demon, and to get out, and not because of anything other than the fact that she was born with a quirk that she couldn't control. It not only makes sense as to why Toga left in the first place, but it also makes a lot of sense as to why she follows staying. Not only heroes, but good people in general are supposed to be there when you can't help yourself. But the saddest thing about Toga that I'm thinking about now is the fact that she didn't even know that she needed help. Going a little bit further in the chapter, as Toga is walking around her house, she ended up walking to the room that she used to stay in when she was young, and this immediately sparked memories of Toga in that room. One such memory was when she was sleeping, she was dreaming and wishing that she could become a little birdie, saying that it was so cute. She says she wishes she could be Kei-chan or Ki-chan, I don't know which one it is, but I'm assuming this may be her younger sister or a friend that she had. Maybe it was somebody who was mentioned in the story that I don't remember, but Toga goes on to say that the dimples that she had when she was smiling were so pretty. Now, this is something that she's thinking and dreaming about, and while she's dreaming about it, she's quite literally biting her own skin to suck her own blood, which more likely than not is just the reaction that connects to her emotion that activates her quirk. And if that didn't make sense, let me just say it in this way. You know how when Toga is all riled up emotionally and says, I want to be like Ochako, or I want to be just like Deku, or I want to be like Stain, the higher her emotion gets, the less likely it is for her to be able to control her urges for using her quirk. So in her sleeping and desiring to be like a birdie or to be like this Ki-chan, that emotion made Toga want to transform into that person, which means that she has to take blood, which means that she is deciding to suck her own blood. But the way that Toga describes exactly what it is that I'm telling you is that every night she has this dream where there's a red sparrow dancing and she can feel its feet gently moving on her belly. Now, I was curious as to why Horikoshi chose a sparrow, so I looked up what a sparrow symbolizes in Japan, and on a general basis, it's implied to represent good harvest and happiness, which happiness is a factor in what makes Toga want to transform into somebody else. But it gets even more fascinating, I guess is the only word that you can really use for this, because Toga continues by saying that in this dream, the red sparrow ends up eating away at her belly button, and before she notices it, he's dancing inside of her belly, dyed bright red from head to toe, and it feels so good. The only thing that I can really make of this dream is that that is the personification of what she feels whenever she's wanting to use her quirk. And more likely than not, those feelings are more so tied to how other people have treated her throughout her entire life, because to me, it seems as though she wants to be like the people she loves because she never was enough for the people that she actually loved. Being that her parents, siblings, peers, and all other people were treating her completely different for something that she couldn't control, but because those same people treated others better than they treated Toga, maybe turning herself into them can get her the fulfillment and acceptance from society that she couldn't otherwise get. But she can only do that if she gets the blood from other people, in which they're not going to let her just get the blood, so she has to take it by force, aka the sparrow on her belly button breaking into her body and dancing on the inside. But in continuing on through the chapter, we find out that Dabi was also with Toga in her tour of her home, but it doesn't seem like she knew that she was going back to her home for the purposes of going to check and see how things work. So that tells me that they are potentially on a mission that All For One told them to go out to for the purposes of taking out some heroes or leading another group of villains to a certain area. And I'm actually curious if you're going to focus on Dabi and Toga together, because these two were the first villains introduced to the series outside of Shigaraki and Kurogiri, and in their introduction into the series, their conversation was flipping society upside down and creating the world that Stain was describing. So it could be possible that because Dabi and Toga are together, they could bump into Stain some way, shape, or form. Then we can get an actual conversation between Stain, Dabi, and Toga, which would be a conversation that I would just love to see. But outside of that conversation, in this conversation, Dabi does say a few things that are really fascinating to me that leads up to a huge reveal that we kind of guessed, but we didn't guess at the exact same time. And when I say we, I mean y'all and not me, because I definitely didn't think this was possible. Dabi directly asked Toga, does she have what it takes to put an end to this pathetic world? And Toga responded back by saying, well, she can't go back now, which is a very interesting way of phrasing it, because she didn't just say yes or of course, she said, well, we can't go back now. So it's possible that even though she potentially wanted to create a better world, this isn't what she thought it would be like. But because things are so far gone, she can't go back now. I want you to remember that specific thing for what I'm going to talk about later on when it comes to another character at the end of the chapter. But Dabi's response with that was good. This world doesn't give a damn whether you smile or cry. The sun will rise again tomorrow, impartial to all. So let's have a good laugh, Toga Himiko, as he proceeds to effectively blow up Toga's old house. But it's the next portion that just changes everything for the entire story of My Hero Academia forever, because Toga then mentions that the heroes are going to find them, and while saying that, she just randomly says that Dabi is too kind. Now I don't know if that's a translation issue, so I'm definitely going to wait until the official release to get a better context on that. But Dabi's response is that the heroes are stretched thin and they don't have the manpower to come after them. And in responding to Toga saying that he's too kind, he says, that might just explain why I want to make Endeavor suffer so much. Now, do you see what I'm talking about? I just don't know if that makes sense, right? But if it does, then I really want to find out what the heck he's talking about, because I can't understand that at all. But what I do understand is the severity of the heroes at the end of My Hero Academia, because Dabi says that before Gigantomachia tore down the mansion to go run to Shigaraki, he managed to grab a sample of blood from a particular person. And coincidentally, that random person is twice. And the crazy thing about it is, when it comes to Toga, as long as the blood is from someone that she holds dear, she is able to use their quirk. So now Toga quite literally has access of reviving twice in some way and using his quirk to utterly destroy Hero Society. She can quite literally transform into Twice, create multiple of Twice's doubles, and create clones of every single member of the core League of Villains, having hundreds of Shigarakis, hundreds of Togas, hundreds of Dabis, hundreds of All For One, and hundreds of Spinner. Okay, that last one, hey, we gotta put respect on Spinner's name. And this is still freaking huge, mainly because one, this is hella big brain by Dabi. And the more that we continue about the story, All For One was right when he told Dabi that they are very much alike, because Dabi has displayed planning and strategy better than any villain in the entire story of My Hero Academia outside of All For One himself. And two, how the freak are the heroes going to be able to do anything with Toga and the villains now? It just seems very unlikely that the heroes are going to win. But let's continue further to the last portion of the chapter. And this portion actually dives deep as to why Spinner is a really important person. So for the Spinner haters that be hating the fact that I be hyping him up, shut up, because I'm right. We go to the cave in which All For One, Shigaraki, Spinner, and Skeptic are at. And we see that Spinner is really concerned about Shigaraki in his current state of being, even asking to verify if Shigaraki is still Shigaraki. Now, out of every character in the League of Villains, the one who is the most dedicated to Shigaraki is Spinner. And interestingly enough, it's not because he has any ulterior motive or he views Shigaraki as his all-powerful force that he cannot overthrow, so he's not going to be able to go against them. And instead, it's because out of everyone, he seemingly is the only one who got as close to Tinko as anyone. And yes, you did hear that right, I said Tinko. Now the reason why I say that is because how he talks about Shigaraki versus how everyone else talks about Shigaraki. If you remember, when All For One finally met the main crew of League of Villains that Shigaraki was able to create after the events of the torturous prison break, the most interesting thing that was said from a Spinner is that he and Shigaraki often have conversation about different video games, kind of expressing that their relationship wasn't a leader or subordinate, but more so a friend supporting type of relationship compared to everyone else. Albeit he did know that his role was to look up to Shigaraki when it comes to the League of Villains. What I'm saying is Spinner's relationship to Shigaraki was that of a friend, and that is the catalyst for why he is so gung-ho on taking care of Shigaraki. It's similar to characters like Ida and Ochako having strong dedication to their friend Deku because they created a good experience with each other, but they know each other more deeply than every other person. Understanding that dynamic is really important to me because of where we are in My Hero Academia and the state that Shigaraki/Tinko is in mentally inside of All For One. So let me explain what I mean by continuing on with the review of the chapter. After showing a strong level of concern about Shigaraki, Skeptic came in and told Spinner that out of all the villain activities, Spinner out of all people is well aware that the highest percent of all the perpetrators of villainous activities are mutants. He goes on to say that despite the government and the heroes' efforts, the heteromorphs remain entrenched in darkness, and that many people, just like Spinner, has a deep hatred for those who call themselves heroes. And that actually makes a lot of sense because it's the people who looks completely different than everybody else who is more likely open to discrimination. And because of that, they are more likely to be secluded from society and having a strong hatred to societies, that they are more likely to cause harm to the society that doesn't accept them, which is the main reason why Spinner decided to join the League of Villains in the first place. Now, because it is understanding that majority of villains essentially are people who are mutants, and Spinner, who is perceived by these mutants as the pinnacle of mutants, it seems, being that he's connected to Shigaraki and All For One, Spinner unknowingly is the leader of the remnants from the Paranormal Liberation Front and the other mutant villains and criminals all throughout the country, making him unknowingly a leader of hundreds of thousands of villains. Even though he says he never had any high ideals in mind, that doesn't stop the fact that people are going to follow him no matter what. And this is actually what he said next, which ties back to my initial point between his relationship between Shigaraki or Tinko Shimura, and it also connects back to what I said about what Toga said in the beginning of the video. Twice thinks to himself, it doesn't matter what a small fry like me thinks. This can't be stopped anymore. Whatever. I'm done thinking about it. If it's for Shigaraki's sake, I will. And then we go to a cover spread with many mutant villains ready to follow the footsteps of Spinner. Now, if you go back to what Spinner says and break it down, it kind of gives you an idea of what Spinner actually wants, what Toga actually wants, and what Shigaraki actually wants. Spinner says, it doesn't matter what a small fry like me thinks. This can't be stopped anymore, which is essentially another way of responding to what Toga said earlier in the chapter, where Dabi asked her if she's prepared to destroy the world as they know it, and she says, well, you can't go back now, meaning that both Toga and Spinner has things that they are thinking about that they want to either question or bring up as a potential concern, but because they're so far in the process of destroying the world, nothing that they say really matters right now. And that is further emphasized by Spinner saying, whatever, I'm done thinking about it. Thinking about what, huh, Spinner? Thinking about an actual good world where you and one of your best friends, Shigaraki, can actually play video games together? Thinking about a world where you, Toga, and Shigaraki can actually have fun and not stress over the fact that you have to kill heroes for a living? Thinking of a world where you don't have to be burdened by the titles of heroes or villains? And you may have already caught on as to how this connects to Shigaraki. Well, if you remember, and I believe My Hero Academia chapter 297, which is the chapter in which All For One commanded all the nobles to take Shigaraki's body and run away. If you remember at the end of the chapter when Deku failed his pursuit in trying to get Shigaraki, Deku said that Shigaraki inside of the One For All Vestige world looked like he wanted to be saved, but his action seems to be the opposite. This was further pointed out when Deku went into the One For All Vestige world and Nana Shimura confronted him on if he could potentially actually kill Shigaraki, to which he said he doesn't know if he can kill Shigaraki, but he does know that he wants to try to save Shigaraki, which is something that was inflated even more so at the end of the Star and Stripe versus Shigaraki fight. When Star and Stripe's vestige inside of All For One was being destroyed, she mentions that as long as there are people who are willing to help others, somebody will take All For One out. In the next page, we see deep inside of All For Shigaraki's joint body, Tinko Shimura saying Izuku Midoriya. All of these signs point to one simple idea, which is that Shigaraki, or better yet, Tinko Shimura, wants to be saved, but he won't allow himself to be open enough to say that he wants to be saved because of how Hero Society has molded him into who he is today. Along with the fact that he's done so much wrong that it's nearly impossible for him to believe that society and the heroes are going to ever be able to forgive him. And for those who are skeptical as to if that's actually what Shigaraki believes, the perfect example of Shigaraki and the perfect representation of Shigaraki, who is actually going through this mental lapse right now, is Aoyama. And the one thing that he constantly spills out of his mouth is that he doesn't believe that he's worthy of being accepted into society because he's done so many bad things. And that's almost like saying, I really want to be good. I really want to do something good, but because I'm so far gone, there's no stopping anything anymore. And there's also a similar thing that Toga said to Dabi. So I say all that to say, I theorize right now that 2 characters out of those 3 are going to be redeemed by the end of My Hero Academia. And those characters are Spinner and Toga. But you can't be redeemed unless you watch this video right here. When you zone, every single